Good morning. Welcome to episode 6 of SAS From Scratch. We're making really good progress. There's about 16 chapters in total, so almost halfway. Today's episode is all about the PROC PRINT procedure. We're going to be revisiting PROC SORT, but we've already looked at that a few times. We will look at the label statement, and we'll just take a quick look at by groups and by statements as well. So let's get started. The PROC print procedure allows for the creation of very basic reports. These are extremely useful. It's not something that you would usually send to a client, for example, but it is very useful if you need to quickly communicate some results or a subset of data to somebody in your team. If you were to use them for, or if you were looking for an alternative that you would actually send to a client, something that's more mutable perhaps, is the PROC report option. That's usually what's used in the industry. And you would combine that with the ODS delivery system, the output delivery system. We're not going to look at that now. We will look at the ODS system in one of the last chapters. But for now, PROC print is extremely useful. Definitely something to have as part of your repertoire when you're working with SAS. And let's go through the syntax, and then we can look at an example of that as well. So syntax 6.1 there, very simple. We've dealt with PROC SORT, we've dealt with PROC contents. We're now looking at PROC print. You can again see it's the same kind of thing again. PROC, whatever the name of the PROC is, data equals whatever your input data set is, and that can be followed by some options and statements as well. So here's an example, PROC print data, and that's just an example data set in the work library. We've enabled the no obs option here, which means that we won't see observation numbers. That's your row numbers. And we've also selected a subset of variables here. So if we wanted to do something similar, I think let's maybe take the cars or the fish data set. Let's do fish. And we don't even need to do this. We could, now that I think about it, we could just read it straight from the SAS help.fish library anyway. So let's run this very quickly, see what output it gives us. Note that this goes to the results tab. There's not an output data set. And we can see the observation numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got weight, length 1, length 2, length 3, height and width. So it's the same stuff that we would see in the output column if we had a data set, but this is more readable, and it's more presentable if you need to send it to somebody to look over. Let's do the no obs option. That will just remove the numbers column, so you can see that's no longer there. And then what can we subset from here? Let's maybe use only length 1, and we can drop length 2 and length 3. So we'll keep species, weight, length 1, height and width. And that will subset our data set, or that will subset the columns for presentation to only these columns. Important to stress that the underlying data set is not being touched. And we can see that length 2 and length 3 have been removed from the presentation. So that's a good start. Let's see what else we can do with PROC print. We can add an ID statement, and that will identify the rows with the variables we specify. Instead of having a row number there, we discarded our row number column anyway. You can add a variable to both the ID and the var statements. It's redundant, and you probably wouldn't, but it'll simply be printed twice if you do. And PROC print can also be combined with a where statement if we wanted to filter. So we're starting to combine a lot of what we've learned before. We've learned about different procs, and we've noticed how they almost always take a data set as input, so data equals something. We've learned we can combine them with by statements and by grouping. ID statements we'll see again in future. We're learning about it now. The where statement that we normally use in data steps, we can now also use in PROC print. So all these little bits of things that we've learned about are all coming together now. So let's add an ID statement for our fish data set. We can probably do it on the species column. We'll see that we can print it twice, but then we'll remove it from the var statement, and then we will subset something with a where as well. So I am going to add the species column as an ID column, and I'm going to keep it in here for now in the var statement as well, just so that we can see what that looks like. You'll notice I've got species nicely highlighted here as an ID column, and I've got species here, which is just a normal subsetted sounds correct, subsetted column of the data set. So if we remove this one here, it'll look less repetitive. We have species, we have weight, length, height, and width. We can add a where statement in here. So we can say, for example, let's look for where the height is, where the weight is greater than 500, for example. Okay, so we've filtered on that. We've got a subset of our data set. We've got a subset of the columns in that data set. And just to play around with the one other thing that that's in the SAS-based prep guide are these options, which is to say, well, where do you want your first observation to start for the PROC print? So let's say I want to start at 10. See, now it would actually help to have that observation column here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's start at 20 and do 20 to 30. Then we should see that that whitefish row as well. Let's run this. There we go. So we've got 11 columns in here now, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yes, 30 minus 20 plus 1, that gives you 11. And there's the whitefish that we knew was somewhere around row 20 somewhere. I don't particularly think that this is a very useful option. It's really clunky to subset based on row numbers. It's much better if you wanted to isolate the whitefish. You should just do that with a where statement. By default, this is set to 1 and max. And if we wanted to change that back to the original, we could do that. This is not something that I think I have ever used. I have never actually seen it in practice in my industry. I'm sure if you use it, feel free to let me know in the comments what you use it for. I'd love to know. So that's basically that for this slide. As you can see, it's all very straightforward. And then we get to something that's very useful, which is the sum statement. And this allows you to do summation within the PROC print, and this produces a subtotal column for you. This as well does not change the underlying data set. It applies only to the PROC print, and you can do this summation in combination with a by group. So for each group that you then specify, a subtotal is summed, and then at the very end you'll have a grand total as well. Very important to note, when we use a by group, we have to make sure the data is sorted according to that by group, and that holds true for anything you do. If you use a by group in a data step, so if you say, for example, by age and name, then your data set has to be sorted by age and name. If you use, and we'll talk about that, I think next episode we'll do a quick look at PROC means, which is your PROC for summary statistics. If you say that you want to do summary statistics by X and Y, your data set has to be sorted by X and Y. So whenever you see a by statement in a piece of SAS code, that means that SAS expects the data to be sorted according to that by statement as well. Something else we can look at is that we can page our results with a page by statement, and we'll see what that looks like as well. That actually goes hand in hand with the title and footnote stuff that we'll look at later too. So let's do summing and by groups. So in this case, let's just look at our results again. I think let's do it by species, and we already know it's going to fail because B comes before W, but W does not come before P. So it's going to try and sort species ascending by default. So let's put that in, and it's going to tell us that it's failed. And then we'll see how we fix that. Perfect. So the data set sashelp.fish is not sorted in ascending sequence. The current by group has species whitefish, and the next by group has species perch. So it's complaining about exactly what I said. W is sorted before P, and SAS is not happy with that. So the way we would solve this is to go and sort our sashelp.fish dataset. Let's output it as fish. We do that by species, and we run. Now in this case, our input dataset for the PROC print can no longer be sashelp.fish because our sorted dataset is work.fish. So let's put that in and run this again. And now you can see that we've got a group for green, a group for perch, a group for pike, and a group for whitefish. What we can now do is then add a sum column. So let's sum the weight of all these. Sorry, that's a row. It's not a column. So we add a subtotal to this column, which is for the weight. And we can see that for each of these we have a single subtotal here, until we scroll down to the very last one, where we also have a grand total. So if you go and you add up all these subtotals, you'll get to this value. And you could do you could add in the length and the height and the width here, I believe. Let's do these 3 columns, that should work. And you can see that it adds these subtotal columns everywhere. To be consistent, let's add length 1 as well, otherwise it's going to bug me. So now we've got neat subtotal columns. Again, this does not change the underlying data. This is only for the print procedure and it's for display purposes. And then there's our grand total row as well at the very bottom. Now we said we can also page these results. With a page by statement. What did I do? Aha. So sorry, I'm used to these warnings and errors by now. So you can see that in this case, in some cases, SAS will give you an error and say, sorry, I don't understand the keyword. In other cases, SAS will say, okay, well, I assume you meant page by, and you spelt it paged by. And then SAS will go and fix it for you, but it will still highlight it for you with a warning, and we should go and fix that. Note as well that this keyword is not highlighted in blue like the others, which should have been a clue to me from the start. And so if we run this now, what happened here is we've got a new page for each one of these species, and that's indicated with this line here. So these are all now on their own page if you were to go and output them. Yeah, that's about it, I think. So we've also seen now that as soon as you add something in here, a by group, you also need to sort by that by group. And just to reiterate, that holds true for anywhere that you're going to use a by group. Right, we've covered everything on this slide. Labels. We've talked about labels before. So SAS has 2 ways of decorating a column. You can decorate it with just a name, and that has to conform to all of the SAS rules. So for a variable name, that's 32 characters, only alphanumeric and underscores, has to start with either a letter or an underscore, and thereafter can be any combination of letters, numbers, or underscores. Now that's for the name, and that's how you would refer to it in your SAS program as well, by name. However, you can decorate a column name with a label, and in there you can put, for example, special characters, spaces, etc. Your labels can be up to 256 characters. And the label statement can be put in some PROC steps, and it can always be done in a data step. So the change is permanent in a data step, but it's temporary in a PROC step. So if you plan to use the labels for more than just a PROC print, for example, you would do that in a data step first, so that you don't have to keep repeating it. For PROC print, there's also a label option that you need to enable to make sure that it actually uses the labels you've specified. Otherwise, it would just ignore it. So you can put it in there, but it won't display it. And even if the data set already has labels applied to it, you would still need to do that. You would still need to add that option. Okay, let's do that. Out of interest, we can see if this data set maybe already has labels applied to it. So we're adding the label option here. Let's run that. Let's see what it looks like at the moment. Species, weight, length. I have a feeling this one does not have labels applied. No. So there's no labels at the moment. These column names are still the same. So let's add our labels. So we can... Now we do this with a label statement. As with any statement, it starts with a keyword, it ends with the semicolon. In this case, let's say what are all our columns again? Species, weight, length, height, width. So let's try and make it more informative for the reader. Fish species. Are these all freshwater? Bream, perch, pike. I wonder if they're all. I can't remember. I know a pike is freshwater. Okay, let's not worry too much about that. And so the way you would add a label is name equals and then in quotes what you want your label to be. And you then close that off with a semicolon. So let's look at it now. Instead of just saying species, that now says fish species. Let's say, for example, that our weight, I'm going to assume this is in grams. So let's make that more clear to the reader. And let's run this and see what happens. So there's fish species and there's weight in grams, and we've now added brackets and spaces and all of that in there to make it more readable. The underlying variable name is still weight. Now the way we've done this is clunky. You don't want to write it like this, and you don't need to write it like this. So instead what you can do is you can simply add another line here to do both columns in one statement. And it's important to note that that remains a single line as well. So you're not going to put commas in there or anything else in there. So there's fish species, there's our weight in grams. However, if you've got, you can already see where this is going. We need to do it for 3 more variables. And if at some point we're just going to scroll past the edge here, which is not ideal either. So what do we know about SAS? Unless a line ends with a semicolon, it's not counted as terminated. So SAS will continue reading multiple lines until it actually gets to the semicolon. So to make it more readable for ourselves, we can do something like this. And we can even add in an extra space here to make it very neat and tidy. And now let's continue with the rest. Let's say length 1 equals length in centimeters. We can do the same for height. Height in centimeters, and we've got width, which is probably also in centimeters. Right, so now we've got all of our labels done. If we run this, we'll get a neat report: fish species, weight, length, height, width, and it's all got the units attached as well. Again, that's quite easy, and notice how we started with something really small. In the beginning we had PROC PRINT and a run statement, and we've now added all of this to make a much nicer and more readable report. I think we've covered everything in there. Just to note again, so those labels that have now been set in the PROC step are temporary. Once you do something with that data set again, you'll notice that the labels are gone. If you wanted them to be permanent, you would have done it in a data step here to add the labels, and you would do it in exactly the same way. So if we do data fish2 run set fish, we can take this whole block, pop it in there, and these labels would be permanent. And then let's just use fish2 here. So notice what we're doing. SAS help.fish goes into the sort procedure. It pops out the fish data set. The fish data set is used as input for the data step fish2. That data step is written out to the work library as work.fish2. And then that fish2 data set goes into the PROC print to be printed. And if we run this, we'll get exactly the same results, but if you look at work.fish and you look at these columns here, we can switch our view to column labels instead of column names. This is still exactly the same. If we go to fish 2, which is the data step where we set the labels, and we click on column labels, we can now see fish species, weight grams, length centimeter, etc. And if we click on these columns here in the columns viewer, you'll notice we have weight versus weight grams as well. And we will always, in our calculations and our data steps, we're going to be referring to it by the name, not the label. Cool. I'm going to take this out. I actually want it to be in the print procedure for now, and I want to keep that print procedure nice and tidy. That's it. Let's move on. The next one that we're going to look at is titles and footnotes. So these are global statements. They're similar to a libname or an option statement that'll last until the session actually ends. So if you set up a title and footnote in one program, then you close that program, but SAS itself stays open. Then for every other program that you work on and open and run, those titles and footnotes will keep being propagated. SAS allows you to have 10 titles and 10 footnotes. So they're title 1, title 2, title 3, up until title 10. Footnote 1, footnote 2, footnote 3, up until 10. The statement title is equivalent to title 1. And the statement footnote is equivalent to footnote 1. This is all, I think, very straightforward, and we'll add some titles and footnotes into our fish report just now. The important thing just to keep in mind, if you redefine title X, you clear all the other titles that have a number larger than X. So if you specify title 1, title 2, title 3, then you've got 3 global statements for titles that are now permanently part of your session. If you hop over to another program, so if we have a different tab somewhere, and you redefine title 2, then that clears title 3, title 4, title 5. So if you've got, let's say for example, let's simply look at it. Let's do title 1. And you don't have to do title 1, you can just do title. Fish report, title 2, for bream, title 3, dimensions of fish. So if we do something like this, and let's do here, if we do this, let's just run this and make sure it works. So we should see only bream in here now. That's correct, we have all the bream. Here's our titles, fish report, 4 species bream, dimensions of fish. And so if I go and copy and paste this entire block, so there's the original block, here's my new block, and just to make it clear, we can we can make this one for whitefish. Now note, what's a good way of demonstrating this? Sorry, I need to to just think of a good way of doing it. I'm just going to swap these two. So fish report, dimensions of fish. This one is for bream, this one is for whitefish. And if I comment out this row, no, I'm sorry. It is too early in the morning for me. This is actually better. What we'll see is that if let's comment all of these out quickly. If I comment these out and I don't touch the title statements, then this title will simply be repeated for this PROC print. So fish report, for species bream, dimensions of fish. All good, that says bream. If we scroll down, our species is now whitefish, but it still says for species bream. Now we look at that and we say, oh my goodness, that's wrong. Let's go and fix that. And perhaps you look at this as a program and you say, okay, well, I only want to change title 2. I don't need to change title 3. And you decide to comment this out. Now, if you run your report again, fish report for species bream, dimensions of fish. If we look at our whitefish, fish report for species whitefish, and we've lost this third title because that is what is expected. That is the expected SAS behavior. If you change title 2 to something else, it will clear all titles that follow it. 3, 4, 5 up until 10. So if we want that to be repeated, we would have to go and physically type in title 3 dimensions of fish again. There we've got it for the bream, there we've got it for the whitefish. Once again, I'm going to take this out. I'm going to change this back to weight greater than 500 grams. And just so you know, you can keep only title 1 and title 3 if you want. I think title 3, they get smaller as well. So the font on the report, the headers get smaller as well. So what do we think will happen here if we run this? So we're setting title 1, we're setting title 3. What happens to title 2? It should be cleared because we've sent the statement title 1, which clears everything from 2 to 10. And then we set title 3, which clears everything from 4 to 10. So if we run this, note that we no longer have fish species bream, or any other species for that matter, because we've cleared that title. Okay, straightforward, I think. Yeah, we've covered all of that. So let's move on to our exercise for today. And I might actually, if you need this, please take a screenshot of it. I'm just going to clear it out so that we can actually do the exercise. So our exercise for today, we're going to read in the SAS help.class data set. That's a data set that has some information about boys and girls in a classroom, their age, I think their height and their weight as well. And then we want to make a report of that. Maybe the school principal has asked us for a report of this class, and we're going to provide him or her with the report. We're going to keep the name, sex, age, and weight columns. We're going to replace the observation number column with each student's name, so we can already see where this is going. We're going to use the ID statement. We're going to filter the students. That's a where statement. And we're going to add up the weights for the boys group and the girls group separately. That's a sum and a by group. We're going to add some labels to the report. That's at our discretion what we want to call the column names. And then we'll add 2 titles and 2 footnotes again of our choice. And we will repeat titles and footnotes for the boys and girls. So what that means is you would use a page by statement. If you don't use a page by statement, we can look at that, but you'll basically have titles at the very top. You'll have all your different tables being printed, and then footnotes at the very bottom. So if you want to do it by boys and girls and have a title and footnote for both those tables, you would use the page by statement. So let's start with that. Let's do PROC print data is SAS.class run. Let's start with this, simply this, and see what we got. So this is what we have. We have name, sex, age, height, and weight. We don't want this OBS column. So let's fix that immediately. We say, okay, well, our name column will be the OBS column, and that replaces the row numbers immediately. We want to drop that weight column, and we want to keep only name, sex, age, and weight. We don't have to put name again because we've already got it in the ID statement. So let's do sex, age, and weight. Cool, we've done that. Now, excuse me while I go look at the questions again. Filter for ages 14 and up, and then get their weight separately. So let's do that. We are now filtering where age greater than or equals to 14. As always, remember you can also use this keyword for greater than or equals if you prefer. We want to do it by sex, and we're going to sum weight. Let's run that. Error. Why? Because it is not sorted properly. You have MF, 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 MF. And what SAS expects is all the F's before M, because that's how they're sorted in the alphabet, obviously. So let's do that. PROC sort data is SAS_help.class, and we'll just take that out to work.class. Close that with the run statement and do by 6. And then for this one, we now want to use the work.class dataset instead. Cool. We've got that for the boys and girls separately. And there's the weight summed, and then there's our grand total at the bottom as well. Something else we can do, although I believe these are already... Okay, so they're already sorted alphabetically. If we didn't want to sort them alphabetically, we could have also done it like, let's say if we wanted to do it by age, we can sort this by sex and age. The only thing that needs to correspond between the print and the sort, apologies. So if we sort by sex and age, we're going to sort first by sex, and then it'll sort by age. And in our PROC print, we're just saying, okay, we expect sex to be alphabetical. So it doesn't matter what comes after this, as long as these first items correspond. And if we wanted, for example, by sex and age, and we put in here also name, that again doesn't matter as long as these correspond with one another, because that's the by group that SAS is going to be using. So let's do it like this, and let's just take a look at our results. We've got 14, 15, 14, 15. We expect that to be 14, 14, and 15, 15, which should work if we do this. It does. There's your 2 14s, there's your 2 15s, and there's 2 14s, 15, and 16. Up to you. You can choose to do this by the name as well. It doesn't really matter. What else was in the questions? Add some informative labels, add titles and footnotes, 2 titles, 2 footnotes, and then page by. So let's just do the page by now. Now I'm just curious if in the slides I misspelt it. No, I did not. It was only in my head this morning. So we want labels. Sorry, we want a label statement, 4 labels. We've got name, sex, age, weight. So let's do for name, we set that to student name. For sex, we ask male or female. Age. And I'm being obtuse, not obtuse, verbose on purpose here, so that we can see that the labels are actually applied. Or maybe we can instead do something like this. And so if we run this, the labels are not applied because I forgot to add a label statement at the top here. So need to add it here to tell SAS that it should use this label statement. Cool. So now we have student name, we have male or female, we have age in years, and we have weight in No. Unless this is a very, very overweight school, you would not expect to see that. So these weights are in pounds. Cool. Looks good. Now we're going to be adding, one more thing. Note the line here, just to indicate that our page by is working as well. And now we want to add titles and footnotes. So I'm going to start with that immediately. Footnote 1, footnote 2. So let's say cool high school. Cool kids demographics. And then we can, what do we add for the footnote? Note weight is measured in pounds. Note our kids are not chonky. So let's run that, see what it looks like. We've got cool high school, we've got cool kids demographics, we've got all of our labels, we've got our totals for the subtotals and grand total for the weights. We've got footnotes that repeat on each page because we've used the page by statement. Or it repeats for each gender because each gender is on a new page because we use the page by statement. We've got all our girls on one page, we've got all our boys on the other page. I think that's it. I think that about wraps it up. Yeah, that's chapter 6 done. We've learned about yet another new PROC, the print PROC. And that's that. So let's look at the next episode. Episode 7, we're going to be talking about the PDV again. Yes, again, because that's how important it is. We need to look at it more in depth. I'm, for the most part, simply going to be pointing you to the prep guide. There's a process flow chart that you should look at in there. I'll try and do something cool with the PDV. I have something in mind. And then we're going to be searching for data errors using PROC FREC and PROC means. And so what is happening here is, in the prep guide, they try and gently introduce you to these two new procs. So PROC means is usually for your summary statistics. And what they're using it for here is simply to go and find minimums and maximums if you, for example, have weights in your data set. And so if you've got a weight that says 500 kilograms, that's something that you would like to go and check. But if you've got 10,000 records, that's hard to see. If you've got one row of summary stats that says this is the min, this is the max, that becomes a lot easier to see. PROC FREC is for counting stuff. So again, as an example, PROC FREC would allow you to say, okay, count how many girls and boys are in the class. And if you've got 10,000 students in your school, if you use a PROC FREC statement and it says, okay, girls 5,000, boys 4,999, and then, I don't know, alien something else, you know, one count of that. That's something where you would go and say, okay, let's find out what's going on here. Is there an alien in the school? Should we be worried? But it's just another way of taking, sort of condensing data to the point where you can evaluate it. That's that. That's it for next time. And then we're gonna be almost halfway. So there's about 16 chapters in the book that we need to go through, and then I'm adding a 17th video because there's 2 extra topics that are not covered in the prep guide that I will cover, and then it's SAS base exam time. But that wraps it up for today. So again, thank you very much for watching. Please feel free to leave a comment if I missed anything or if there's ways that I can improve. Otherwise, you're free to like and subscribe as well if you want to be notified about the next batch of videos that are coming out. I'm also going to start putting them out on a schedule. I think I'm looking for maybe Mondays and Wednesdays or Mondays and Thursdays, about 8 to 9 a.m. GMT. So you can keep a lookout for that as well in your subscriptions list. But that's it for today. So until next time, thank you very much for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers. Bye-bye.